Today's guest is a pioneer for women's health. She took her own suffering and transmuted it into creating a podcast that is both informative and inspiring. Welcome to the show, Hannah.
Thank you.
I'm so happy that you're here because I know that you have already helped so many women with your work and that you will absolutely inspire the people on this show.
Thank you.
So thank you.
I'm so glad you started a podcast.
Thank
because
you.
We met, through my podcast.
Yes.
You came on mine, and now I'm here, full circle. So.
Absolutely. So Hannah and I actually met less than a year ago because she will tell you a little more later that she has her own podcast, and it is focused on women's health. And I went on there to tell my story because a lot of women have stories of women's health that need to be shared.
Yeah.
And so I think it's amazing that you started that. And I know it's helped me, a lot of the information, because I listened to it also. And I'm glad you're here so
Thanks
we can hear your story.
Me. Amazing.
So I wanted you to talk a little bit about your upbringing, like, you know, your experiences as a kid and finding your way, finding your voice, how you were with others, and experiences that you think might be interesting.
So where should we start? So I grew up, it's interesting because my childhood was it was great. There wasn't anything traumatic or crazy. I grew up in the suburbs of New York in Westchester. I have a younger brother and sister. I loved high school. I loved my friends. I was healthy, happy. Like it's interesting how everyone, like, you get to a certain point in your life where you're like, oh, that, like, then something happens that, like, triggers this big, like, life epiphany, or at least one of many.
Right.
But nothing really so, like, interesting happened throughout my life until, like, 3 years ago, when we'll get into. But
right.
I had a great childhood. I'm very close with my family and my parents, my siblings, and my friends from high school are still my best friends. And then I went to college I went to the George Washington University for a year, and then I didn't love it. I transferred to Parsons School of Design in the city, and at the same time I did IIN to become a health coach, because actually one thing that had an impact on me from my childhood was that I grew up in a relatively healthy household. My dad had Lyme's disease when I was little, and I don't really remember it as, like, I don't remember him being sick or being, like, a traumatic moment, but I just, like, I know now he had really bad Lyme's disease, and he, in order to heal himself, he changed his diet, and he got, like, really super into health. So he's always been, like, gluten-free, sugar-free. Now he's, like, crazy into intermittent fasting and longevity, and you name it, he's doing it, he's into it. So I guess that kind of started, like, was one of the things that started my interest in health. And so throughout my life, I had really always been interested in, like, health and wellness and women's health. My mom also, I guess now I'm thinking of all these things.
Yeah, that's good.
I should have prepared all of these things, so I could have just gone there to begin with. But my mom was always like, women's health big advocate. She worked for Planned Parenthood for a while as a volunteer, and went to different places in Westchester, like to lower privileged schools, and would do sex ed through Planned Parenthood. And so I remember, like, in my garage growing up, we would have, like, books about sex ed. And so I grew up in a very open household. And I think that's kind of what subconsciously, like, kind of brought me to where I am today, and, like, having all these interests and passions and figuring out, you know, and then my experience with my own health issues really brought me there. But I think that had an impact. And yeah.
It's wonderful. I mean, I think that it's wonderful that you didn't have a lot of crazy trauma, you know, growing up. That's great.
And it's funny, this is crazy, but, like, so I listened to a lot of Gabby Bernstein stuff, and she said, you know, I think she was doing, like, EMDR therapy or transcendental meditation or something, and she had this memory of being raped when she was like 16. And this is such a crazy thought, but I'm like, did something traumatic happen to me that like, because
am I gonna wake up one day and think something's happened to me?
Something traumatic happened because nothing traumatic. That's such a bad way to think, but
no, not at all.
Because I'm like, it's crazy to me. It just blows my mind that people forget, like literally black out memories, like traumatic memories. So now I'm like, oh my God, am I gonna remember something that happened to me one day?
Yeah.
But
oh no, I've had that actually, that thought before too. Like, or a lot of it's related to, I have certain fears or reactions to things, and I'm like, it doesn't feel like it's in this lifetime. Like, I'm like, where is this coming from? Then I'm like, well, maybe it's ancestral. You know what I mean? Maybe it's just in my ancestry. And then all of a sudden I'm like, maybe something happened and I don't remember, you know? I mean, who knows? Who knows? But the beauty is that we remember when it's time.
When it's time, yeah.
You know? And that's the body is, I mean, that is like one of the things that I love about what you're doing, is that the body is so powerful. It protects us by making us forget things that we're not ready to process, and it can heal us. And what you're sharing now is showing people that, or that's what it feels like to me. It's showing people that, and why I think it really relates to finding your voice. Because finding your voice around health, taking back your health, is one of the most powerful things you can do.
Totally.
So, yeah. So let's continue on into your early adult years. Okay. And we can come to, like, it sounds like you had just a great upbringing and a great experience in your early years. And then you started to have health issues. Yeah. You were speaking about. You want to talk to us a little about that?
Perfect. And that's right where I left off. So
awesome.
So I transferred when I was in college, I transferred from the George Washington University to Parsons School of Design, and I was in like a innovation, like entrepreneurial design-based business program there, and it was super interesting. I was living in Brooklyn at the time, and then I did IIN, which is, for those of you who don't know, the Institute for Integrative Nutrition. Certifies you to be a health coach, and I kind of like knew that I wanted to work in the wellness space, but I didn't know what I wanted to do. And at the same time, I was studying design, and I was always interested in business, and I had all these interests that like could relate but didn't really relate. And I was doing a lot of freelance graphic design work. And then at the same time, like simultaneously, I started to develop all of this pelvic pain. I had a bunch of conditions that I can just like list off, but vulvodynia and pelvic floor dysfunction and interstitial cystitis. And I'm happy to talk about all of that in more detail, but essentially I had a boyfriend, and it was not a healthy relationship, and I've also been prone, you could say, to yeast infections and UTIs. So I was very sexually active, and I was getting yeast infections and UTIs and bacterial vaginosis, and my symptoms were burning and wait, do you want me to start this part now? Okay.
Yeah. Okay. You can just share whatever it is, that you want to share.
So I essentially had all of these, what I thought were really weird sexual health, intimate health issues, chronic pain. And I started on this journey of trying to figure out what was wrong, essentially. Right. And like most other women who have these issues, a lot of, they go to a lot of gynecologists, urologists, and they don't get diagnosed. And I was determined to figure out what was wrong and how to heal it, and that's kind of what started me on this whole journey that I'm on now.
Right.
Yeah.
So initially, when you started to go see health professionals, without getting into massive details around it, but just what was going on, like, with you? How did you feel, like, with all of this stuff happening in your body that you didn't really understand? Right.
So, it was interesting because I was getting what I thought were like yeast infections and bacterial vaginosis, and I had this before, not often, but I had the symptoms, and I was like, oh, I just have an infection from sex, and or like whatever, and I'm going to go to the gynecologist and get some antibiotics, and it will go away. And I went to the gynecologist and got antibiotics, and the symptoms actually got much worse. So I was like, this is really weird. This is freaky. Like, my vagina's burning. Pees when I pee, it burns. Like, something's really wrong.
Right.
So I went to a bunch of different doctors, and they were giving me different medications and ointments and I don't know, you name it. I tried it, and nothing was working.
Right.
And things were still getting worse. And it was scary because it's like I'm going to all these doctors, and it's not that doctors are bad. Like, doctors are great. They serve a certain purpose, but they don't have all the answers.
Right. Right. Absolutely.
And it was scary because I was like, what was wrong with me? And I can get into how I finally figured out what was wrong.
Yeah, let us know. It's very scary not knowing what's going on, and I'd love to hear what happened.
I feel fortunate because I know that so many women who suffer from these types of things, especially when I'm 24, and when they're in their 20s, like, they really don't feel comfortable talking to their mom or their friends, and I have always been super open, and I'm like, if something's wrong with me, like, the world's gonna know about it. So, of course, I was just telling everyone, I'm like, oh my God, like, I'm having these crazy problems, and I don't know what to do, and I'm miserable, and whatever. And so my mom, like, I'm very close with her, and we were going to different gynecologists and not able to figure it out, and they were all just telling me, take medication for UTI, take antibiotics, whatever, do this, do that. Essentially, my grandmother, who passed away, and I know that you wanted to talk about that a little bit later, but she had lots of these pelvic floor issues throughout her life. She had interstitial cystitis and different pelvic floor dysfunction kind of problems, vaginal and bladder related issues. And she had this gynecologist in the city who had really helped her, who was a vulvodynia specialist. And there's not many of those in the world, really.
Right.
So, and also for those of you who are listening who don't know, vulvodynia sounds like a really scary term, because when I was first diagnosed with it, I was like, oh my gosh, what the hell is this?
Yeah, it sounds like a crazy.
Yeah, it sounds crazy.
Deadly illness.
Yeah. And so actually a gynecologist did tell me, she said, you have pelvic floor dysfunction. You should go to physical therapy. And I was like, that's crazy. What are you talking about? And at the time, I was having my right foot was hurting me. I had plantar fasciitis in my right foot. So I was in PT for my foot. And I was like, I'm not going to PT for my vagina now. I'm already in PT for my foot.
Right.
So I ignored that. And I was like, pelvic floor, what? And then when things weren't getting better, and my grandma was like, you know what, I want you to go to my gynecologist who specializes in these types of things. So we went to her, and she was like, you have pelvic floor dysfunction and vulvodynia, whatever. You have to go to pelvic floor physical therapy. So I just want women listening to know that these terms sound really scary, but they're really not. Like, they're diagnoses that don't really mean much, and that can go away. Like, it could take years, it could take a minute. Like it doesn't mean anything. It's like saying you have knee pain. A million things could cause it, and a million things could treat it.
Right.
Vulvodynia is just vulvar discomfort.
Right. In a big word.
In a big word. That sounds terrifying, but it's really not. And pelvic floor dysfunction is also a bad term, but it just means your pelvic floor muscles aren't functioning the way they're supposed to, so they're causing pain, but that can also be fixed, healed, And so I finally found this doctor who gave me the right diagnosis, and I went to pelvic floor PT and a bunch of other things throughout the years, but that's what really started my healing and realizing what was going on. And, since I was so open about this, I was meeting so many other women who were like having the same issues.
Right.
And I was like, this is crazy. Like,
yep.
How what? Like, I've never heard about this in my life. Any other medical condition, you hear the name and you're like, oh yeah, I've heard of that.
Right.
But you're like, this is the most like sacred part of the female body, and gynecologists can't even diagnose it. And I hate to put doctors down because I really believe that they serve like a purpose, but it fascinated me. It upset me. I wanted to do something about it. So.
Yeah, no, and we've talked about this before.
Yeah.
Like I had the exact same experience, like kind of just being like, anytime I shared, because you and I have that in common, we
Yeah.
love to talk and like we
Right.
share stuff. But when you do that, every single time,
Yeah,
somebody would say,
someone-
"Oh, that sounds like something. Either I have a friend who has that, or I had that, or this." And there's just like this massive amount of people that are women
Yeah.
who are confused and not getting the help they need for sometimes,
Totally.
like you said, really simple things. Sometimes more complex, but some things really simple.
Really simple,
Like,
yeah.
you know, I spent a year searching, and then for me, it was physical therapy.
Yeah.
And no one had suggested it.
Right,
Not
which is
one
crazy.
physician had suggested it. So it was kind of like,
How is this possible?
how is this possible? Right. How is this possible? And at the same time, learning that we have intuition and we have power
Yeah.
in our own bodies and in our own minds.
You know when something's not right.
You know when something's not right. And, you know, that part of the experience of that, I don't know if you can agree with this,
Yeah.
you know, is also learning that and trusting ourselves more, and listening to that little voice, that big voice, you know, that's telling us, yeah, I don't know that this person's what he's telling me or she's telling me is right. So I'm going to
Yeah.
move on, and I'm going to try and find something that feels right,
Totally.
because something's not right,
Yeah.
you know. And I think there's a lot of people, particularly women, who are giving that power away. Like they just kind of go, oh,
and
okay.
you go to a doctor and they tell you, you know, something, and you listen, and you don't continue.
Right.
And there's one quick story that just came to me that I think is really special and interesting. But when I went to this doctor in the city, I went with the one who finally was helpful. She's a gynecologist, and I went. My mom came with me, and my grandma insisted on coming with me. So, you know, at the time I was in pain and I was angry and I was upset, and I would actually do this thing where I like, it's really bad, but I like wouldn't be nice. And my mom would literally like grab my hand and be like, you can't act that way. And I'm like a grown up, like I'm not 5.
Right.
But it just stuck with me because I'm like, when people are in pain, they're not happy, and the way that they act is not a reflection of who they are, because I will say I'm a very nice person and happy, and so like I'm the sweetest I really am, but I would be so mean to doctors. Like it was bad. But anyways, it was a very special moment because I was sitting in this office with my mom and my grandma, and it was like a 2.5-hour appointment, and I was going through my whole story. And I remember she said to me, she gave me a whole plan, and she was like, it's going to take at least like 4 months for you to feel any improvement from physical therapy and medications and this and that. And I was just hysterically crying, and I was like, no. Like, I can't live this way for 4 more months. I can't live this way for 4 more months. There's no way. And I survived.
You survived.
I survived. But I think that that's how a lot of, like, you know, when a doctor finally, it's like you're happy. It's weird. It's like you're happy you have a diagnosis, but the reality of the situation is sometimes really hard to digest.
Yeah.
And
processing through it and then figuring out what's true for you.
yeah. But
That-
as you said, you have an intuition and you know when something's wrong. So I think that it's really important for women when you feel like something's wrong, and if someone's a doctor, whoever it is, isn't giving you the answers, like keep looking, because you'll get them. Like your story, you finally got the answers.
Yeah, it was a long, I shared it on your podcast. It was a long road.
And everyone go listen to that episode because it was really good.
It made us meet each other.
I know.
And I'm amazed by you. You're 24. It's another reason I wanted you on here because, other than I love you to pieces, and you have such an amazing story, is that, the idea of finding your voice and making a difference, the idea that any age, that it's not at this age or not at that age, or that you have to have horrible traumatic experiences that make you then realize, like, all of those things, none of them are true all the time. Like, everyone has a different experience and everyone has a different purpose. And that you found something already at 24, I think it's remarkable.
Thank you.
I really do. I think it's very powerful.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I never thought that this would have been my path at the moment, at least. But going back to, I started physical therapy, pelvic floor physical therapy, and I became very, very close. We talk a lot. So everyone I meet, every doctor, whoever, physical therapist, anyone, I'll just talk to them. So I'm spending 2 hours a week in physical therapy with the same two women. I was there for months, and I became really, really, really close with these two women, Erica and Kara. And I would see mutual friends in the waiting room, and I just was realizing, I was like, this is a huge problem.
Right.
Like, so many people have similar issues to my issues. And at the time, I was getting into podcasts, and I liked listening to podcasts. And there was no podcast on this topic, on pelvic pain. So I kind of had an idea, and I was like, and I always have rant throughout my life. I'm like, oh, I have this idea, I'm going to do this. I have that idea, I'm going to do that. So I had another one of my ideas, and I was like, I want to start a podcast on pelvic pain. And I'll be, I'll host the podcast, and it will be from the perspective of a patient who has really, like, educated and healed herself, and I'll bring on the practitioners to give them more medical expertise.
Right.
So I said to my physical therapist, what do you think of this idea? And they're the nicest, most supportive two women. They were like, that's great. You should 100% do it. We'll be on the first 2 episodes. Love it.
Amazing.
Yeah. And I was like,
I love that.
I know. And I was like, okay, cool. So I looked up, Googled I Googled podcast equipment, and I ordered it on Amazon. My brother is very tech savvy. He set it up for me. I started this podcast, and it was totally it was on the side. I was doing graphic design work, and it started to grow, and I became more and more passionate about it, and I realized how many women, it was the content was benefiting, and now I'm doing it full time, and life came full circle because I moved back to my parents' house in Westchester, and I'm working on the podcast full time now.
It's amazing.
So who would have thought that
So when you started deciding, we were just talking about this before we started recording, before you started the podcast, did you know what you were doing? Did you feel like you knew what you were doing? Because I feel like I don't know what I'm doing half the time. I'm doing things.
I was thinking about this actually yesterday because someone messaged me and was like, oh, I'm just listening back to your first episode, and asked me a few questions. And I was like, oh my God, the first episode, one of the mics wasn't on. And I went home after, and I re-recorded all of my, every word I said, I re-recorded.
Right.
So,
right. Oh my God, that's awesome.
Back and forth, and I had to record over all of my parts because none of them recorded.
Right.
But I had no idea what I was doing, and as we said, I still don't know what I'm doing. But you learn as you go, and I think that if you're passionate about something and you want to do something, you will figure it out. Because I was like, I want to do this. I'll figure it out. It can't be that hard. You know what I mean?
Right. Well, and it sounds like. So I was going to ask you about this. It sounds like you have really supportive people in your life, and when you made this decision to do this, because you have the gift of gab and you were sharing what you were doing, how did you experience? Did people show up for you? What happened? It sounds to me like almost it magically started just falling into place, without trying too hard, or maybe not. What was your experience?
No, that's a good question. And so my family, my parents have always been so supportive. And they were like, this is great. What you're doing is incredible. And my grandma obviously also experienced a lot of this. And she actually had passed away, I think, right before I started the podcast. So I can also, at first it was called the Women's Pelvic Pain Podcast. Then I changed the name just to give everyone some context to the Women's Pelvic Health Podcast shortly after, because I was like, the name pain has a bad connotation. It's really about health and healing. And more recently, about a year and a half later, I changed the name for the third and final time to the V Hive, and it's more now just about women's intimate health in general.
It's a great name. I love it.
And it has symbolism, as I'm sure you know. A beehive is a place of home and community, and V, I guess a play on vagina, women, and sex, and whatever, intimacy. But So my mom like thought it was amazing because her mom had suffered for so long, and she was like, I could just see grandma listening to this and, you know, like being so interested in all these doctors that are speaking about this, that in her generation, like she was just put on antidepressants and medication, and she actually lived an amazing life, and she had plenty of years where she was in no pain. But my mom has always been really supportive, and my dad as well. And then for the most part, the people that I'm closest with, I think have been supportive. But you always have a friend, like I would have friends, say to me, you're moving home, like you don't want to get a job and just do this on the side. Like people don't know what pelvic pain is unless you're diagnosed with it. So like, I think a lot of people were confused whether they vocalized it or not. They're like, what are you doing? And even still, it's one of the things I think that I'm most insecure about, is that people judgment from people judgment from people in the sense that since I'm not in an office from 9 to 5, like, what is she doing? Like, because I decided to do this full time. Like, do you work? Like, even my cousin, who I love so much, she's like, oh, you could come here, you could do that because you don't work. You don't really have a job. You don't really have a job.
Right.
And I'm like, no, but I do have a job.
How did you handle that?
That's what's hard, I think.
Yeah.
And like, I remember over the summer, one day I went to the beach. I spent a lot of time in Long Island over the summer, and I was at the beach at like 3:00 on a Wednesday with my mom. And I wanted to put a picture. I put like an Instagram story up, me just like going in the ocean with my mom. And I was like so insecure about it. I was like, people are going to see this and be like, what is she doing on the beach at 3:00 on a Wednesday? And and I think that I see a psychiatrist once, like on occasion, who actually is amazing, and he was on my podcast, which is why I started seeing him. But he specializes in all of these women's intimate health issues, and so he's been amazing. And then my mom's also helpful in like just talking to people about it and having them tell me like, for me at least, I grew up, the people I grew up with and the friends that I have now are all, and I love everyone. This is not like to put them down, but they're all in the same kind of track. They all went to a good college and have a 9-to-5 job, and none of my friends are really like in a more creative entrepreneurial field. And so I think that like I sometimes feel like I'm the one person who's doing something different, and everyone else is doing the same thing. And that's what makes me insecure, because I'm just surrounded by people who are not doing what I'm doing.
Right.
But, then my mom she's like, but there are so many people, like, this is just a little bubble that you're in.
Right.
Like, remove yourself from the bubble.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And
like we were speaking about, the people that you surround yourself
with,
it really have an impact as you are finding your purpose and your voice. For me, like the people I keep around me, and especially in the infancy of ideas, is really important, because I'm fragile. Yeah. That idea is fragile. And a lot of it, I think, I love that you brought this up, is about the way other people perceive us, like the judgment of other people, and being outside of, but I like to say being outside of the matrix, personally, because I feel like a lot of this, like, just day-to-day, same thing over and over again thing, once you step out of it, you're like, whoa, there's a whole nother world, and and you're doing it, despite those feelings of fear.
And also, I think another thing that is always positive reinforcement is if you look at like any of the most successful people, everyone told them what they were doing was stupid, and their ideas were bad, and judged them. And
absolutely,
that's like how it goes. You do something different. You do something that people don't understand that they're not doing, and they look at you like you're crazy. But you're not. You're doing something that matters. You're not crazy. Like
absolutely.
And even if you are crazy, whatever,
you're happy.
You're happy. Yeah.
You're supposed to be joyful in life,
And I think that we can also get into this more, and it's one of the questions you wanted to ask me, but I get messages often from women who are like, thank you for doing this. And like, this information has helped me so much. And it's not that I want to stop doing what I'm doing. I never want to. I feel like this is something that I like have to continue to do because it's really important.
Right.
But when I see those messages, it really is like, I'm like, oh, okay, I can't stop doing this.
Right.
Like, I have to do this.
Yeah.
Like, even if I make I mean, I really hope that I can grow this into a profitable business.
Right.
But it's like I have to find a way to make it profitable because I have to keep doing this because it's helping people.
And you absolutely will.
Thank you.
I mean, that's the other thing. It's great because I think that that it's important for us to hear people at different places in their path to awakening, if you will. That, like, you know, for me, I look at certain people that are in a certain position and I forget all the things that they might have gone through to get there.
Yeah,
do you know what I mean?
totally.
And you're in a certain place, but you're not going to stay in that place. Like, you're going forward, and it's going to shift and change and improve. And I know, because what I love is you sound so alive and inspired.
I was literally, that's really
Of course
weird.
you were.
You
we
took
have
the
that
words out
psychic
of my
connection
mouth.
thing going on.
No, you really did. Because something that I also remind myself when I have these insecure feelings is like, you can't have everything. So I have, with what I'm doing, is I have this like amazing passion. I'm so passionate about it. I'm so interested in it. It makes me so happy. And, you know, maybe my friends have the consistency of an everyday job and routine and income, but they may not necessarily have the passion and the happiness and the interest. And so I also listen to a lot of podcasts on like career development and all this stuff. And it's like, if you can find something you're passionate about and something that makes you so happy and that you love doing, I mean, it's not always going to turn into something profitable, but you should pursue that. You should try to pursue that, because if you have a purpose, like, you have that purpose for a reason.
Absolutely. We've talked about that.
Yeah.
I mean, every single person, I really strongly believe this, and it's really one of the reasons that that I wanted to do this podcast, is that everybody comes here with a specific purpose. And we're all trying to remember that. And once you do, like, you will eventually find success. And, you know, who knows? It might be this, or something, this will bring you to something else. Like, for me, I think about that. I'm like, okay, I'm just going to do the next right thing. And I'm going to trust, because I know it's the next right thing. And it will, either I will continue with this, or I will, what I like to call, do the graceful pivot. Like, something will pivot me to something else that I wouldn't have thought of. And I'll do that. And I'll come to the place where I'm supposed to be, because, you know, because that's what happens.
And that's the way life works. And I said the same thing to myself when I made the decision that I wanted to work on the podcast full time and move back to my parents' house. I was like, I'm dedicated to doing this. And if this is going to become something as big as I envision it to become, I need to put all of my time into this. And I was like, I'll move home. I'll do this for a year or two. If it doesn't go anywhere, something else will come of it, or I'll figure the next step out.
Absolutely.
Like, I can't plan this all. I can't have this all figured out, but right now this is what feels right.
Right.
And if the podcast doesn't go to where I want it, then something else, this is going to lead to the next thing.
Absolutely. I totally believe in that. And you're going to have fun and inspiration along the way. And meet a lot of really cool people.
Exactly.
Like, we met each other, right? And we're cool.
Exactly.
So.
So cool.
We're so cool. So, and speaking on that, can you talk about, since you've had this podcast, the Hive, right?
The V Hive.
The V Hive, sorry. I said the V Hive.
Yeah. It's new as of like 2 days.
Yeah, but it's a great name.
No problem.
So since you've had this podcast, you've talked about that. You've had a lot of women writing to you saying, like, you've in a sense changed their life, like, informed them, like, they didn't think there was any help, and they don't feel alone. And can you talk a little bit about that? Like, and just tell us more about that experience.
Yeah, so I mean, that's probably what, like, keeps me doing this, is women who message me on Instagram or email me, and they're just like, I've been suffering for 20 years and I didn't tell anyone about it. Like, I have, you know, X, Y, and Z problems regarding their intimate sexual health. And no one has ever told me what's wrong. And I've never felt comfortable talking about it. And I guess I took it for granted that, like, I was just comfortable talking about it. And it took me a few months to figure out what was wrong. That was, like, easy peasy compared to what a lot of women experience. So I think, I think that it's just, like, being able to use your voice and talk about what you're going through. Like,
right.
People will come, it will attract people to you, because, like, that's all women want, is, like, to feel comfort and to know that, like, they're not alone. And so once I started talking about this, it was like all of these women, like, my friends would come to me. A year after I started this podcast, one of my best friends came to me and she's like, sex isn't supposed to be painful.
Oh my God.
And I was like, this is, like, my best friend. She's known all about my story, my podcast and everything.
Right.
I'm like, what? You never, like, you didn't tell me you had this problem, like, the first day that you knew this was, like, becoming my thing.
Right. And
she was like, I don't know. I just thought that that's the way it was. And I immediately sent her to my physical therapist, and she's better. She's having pain-free sex and life is fine. Yeah. But it's like people either think it's normal or they don't have, like, the voice to advocate for themselves. And it's like, you got to use your voice.
You got to use your voice. Amen. Yeah. And we were also talking about this before. We're going to include it now about, you know, well, one thing that I often, when I'm doing something and I'm freaking out about what other people think or wondering what the F I'm doing because I have no idea, that the truth is that if one person gets helped, like, that's incredible.
It's funny you say that, because that leads, like, directly into probably what one of your next questions will be.
Which is, what do you think? My psychic friend?
I think it was, maybe you had a question about, I don't remember, negative feedback. How
are you dealing with, what do you do to transmute? What do you do to transmute that negative feedback?
Right. One interesting thing that more recently has, because the only really negativity I had received throughout all of this was just the occasional friend or whatever who's like, what are you doing? Why are you doing this with your life? But besides for that, more recently I have, I guess, uploaded a few rather controversial episodes with some doctors who, you know, have their opinion. And other practitioners reached out to me after one episode in particular and told me that, you know, they were shocked that I uploaded that, and that the doctor's wrong and the research is not right and it's controversial to what they do. This was like PT versus a medication.
God forbid. Yeah. God forbid.
And I was like, oh shit, like, what do I, like,
wow.
It's fine. It really wasn't that big of a deal, but I was like, and then I kind of thought, I'm like, okay, but what's the point of, and as you said, what's the point of what I'm doing? Even if this, and by the way, this wasn't like some quack, like, this was a urologist that spent 40 plus years researching bladder pain. So he did have credibility. He does have credibility. Right. And whether someone believes what he does is right or wrong. So I'm like, but anyways, even if that episode helped one person, if it saves one person's life, if one person finds out about a treatment that they can use that solves their problem, fixes their pain, that's all that matters.
Absolutely.
And what I what I've been saying more and more, and I'll say here, is that, like, and I'm sure this is the same for any podcast, any platform, blog, whatever it is. Like, people can take what they want and leave what they don't. And you have different perspectives. Like, I have different perspectives on my podcast. And just because someone doesn't believe that what one doctor has to say is the right way, like, okay, but someone else, that might resonate with someone else. And, like, I'm not saying you have to do all of these things. I'm just, you know, I have a platform that provides high quality information about a specific topic.
And varied information, which is very rare.
Right. So I have the physical therapists. I have the energy healers and the acupuncturists. And patients tell their stories, and then I'll have gynecologists and urologists, and the spectrum ranges of practitioners and experts that are giving their advice.
Right. Yeah.
Anyways, so.
No, well, and I, it brings me to like, I can't emphasize this enough. It is a belief I have. It's that when people in the medical field tell you there's no cure, I'm talking for anything. I don't care what you have. It's not true. They're telling you, I don't have anything left in my bag to help you. That doesn't mean you can't find it somewhere else.
Somewhere else, yeah.
Right? There are billions of people, and people have experiences, and there are pioneers out there that find things that may not be researched, but they work. And they sound crazy. Like, I met this woman, I told you about this on the podcast.
Yeah.
I met this woman on my search she had interstitial cystitis, like the ulcerated bladder kind. She went and did IV vitamin C, which sounds totally counterintuitive because it's acidic. This 63-year-old lady went and did like 5 or 6 weeks, 5 days a week of 50 grams of IV vitamin C, and her pain went away.
Yeah.
No one would have thought that could have worked. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? Like,
right. Different things work for different people.
And the thing is, too, is that with women, because we are so magical and different, each one of us, like there's limitations to what physicians or people in the medical field can do, because we have the power in us also. We have that intuition.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? And when we listen to all these things that you're sharing, then people can kind of like say, okay, intuitively this feels right, or no, this feels right, or I'm going to try this, or I'm going to try that, instead of only getting a limited amount of information that's kind of screened and only is from legit, quote unquote, sources, and still having the same results.
Yeah.
And that is a hopeless feeling.
Yeah.
I'm sure you've come across people who've been hopeless for a really long time.
A really long time.
And suicidal.
Yeah.
Because they don't know what to do.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I've seen a lot of people in that state with these issues. Anyway, so that was my rant. But I think it's amazing. I think it's amazing that you bring those people on. And I like to say, I often think, though, when you get the most haters, and they say this, you've hit something.
Right.
You hit something big,
Exactly. And on that note, another thing that I want to say is that, like, the old me would have been like very reactive, and I think that's like my instinct is to react and to defend myself, because that's probably most people's instinct, just defend yourself.
Right.
But I think what I've realized is, like, just do nothing. Like, when someone sends you a message that where they're expressing their viewpoint, let them express their viewpoint. And now I just say thank you for expressing. Thank you for telling me how you feel. Thank you for your feedback. My purpose is just to share different people's points of view, and I totally get where you're coming from. Thank you.
Yep. I love it.
Yeah.
Don't give it any energy, like any of your energy.
You're not going to change the way someone thinks.
No. And everyone has the right to their thoughts.
Totally.
That's free speech, free thought.
Right.
In our brains, we get to think what we want.
It's all valid.
And it's all valid.
It's all valid.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Wow. So you've already spoken a lot about most of the things that I wanted to speak to you about, which is amazing. So Hannah and I have this, like, when we met on her podcast, we just have this, like, strange psychic connection. Yeah. And that's just another beautiful thing. I want to say that because I feel like it's one of the gifts of taking the leap and making a decision to be in your purpose is the people you meet along the way. Like, the authentic people, that, it's surprising and magical. It was not something I expected, I don't know if you feel the same way,
Totally.
And it's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing because you just, I realize there's so many people who are like me, but I haven't been being myself.
Yeah.
Until I'm myself. And then all of a sudden I start to meet other people like me.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Is Instagram, who kind of has a relatively large Instagram social media presence. Her name's Lara Parker, and she has endometriosis and works for Refinery 29 and writes about it. And she is very open about her problems. And someone asked her a question on Instagram the other day, and she responded to it, and this really resonated with me. And it kind of like, you know, when someone says something that you already do, but then you realize you're like, oh my God, like I do that, and that works so well. Like, but I didn't really pay attention to kind of just one of the things you do well that you don't really realize. But anyways, she was like, someone asked her what allowed you to get to a place where you're so comfortable talking about all of this stuff. And so she can't have penetrative sex. It's too painful. And she has a boyfriend now. This is all via Instagram. And how
like, this is not private information that I'm divulging. She divulged it.
But they're like, how, when you would date people, how would you be comfortable telling them that you can't have sex, penetrative sex? Anyways, she's like, once I got comfortable being myself and like, I wasn't so embarrassed and shy and insecure, I just owned the fact that this was me. It just attracted, like, I became more of an attractive person, like physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. And I realized, I was like, I think what's so interesting about me is that, like, when I remember my boyfriend now, I met him and like this, you know, because also it was, I have an interesting situation because this is what I'm doing for a living now. So people would ask me, what do you do? And I'm like, oh, I have a podcast called the Women's Pelvic Health Podcast. Right. And then when
first date material.
Oh, why'd you start that? And so I was like, well, let me tell you actually why I started this.
I love it.
Yeah. So, but I didn't really like make sense of all of it. But now after she said that, I was like, so anyway, so I literally remember our second date, and he was like, so can I ask, like, why you, like, what caused you to start this? And I was like, well, I had a condition called vulvodynia, and, you know, I was
so like, the second date, we're going to talk about our vagina.
And I really think I just was like, I became so weirdly comfortable talking about my problems because I had this podcast for months already, that it wasn't even, it was like second nature to me. I was like,
this is who I am.
This is who I am. Yeah. I'm fine. Like, it's not a big deal. I feel fine now. I figured out how to heal this. Like, it's not, I don't have some deadly condition. Like, men should know about this. Women should know about this. Like, this is fine. It's just, to me, I'm like, it's the same thing as if you told me you had foot pain or knee pain. As I said, like, it is what it is.
Why is it so taboo?
And I just owned it. Why is it so taboo? Yeah. And I think I just owned it. And like, I remember my mom even said to me, like, because she's had the date go, whatever. And I was like, I told her what we were talking about. She's like, you told him
what?
That? And I was like, yeah, I don't know. I told him that. Yeah. And
you're still together.
We're still together. Yeah. But I think that, like, when you actually can just own who you are and not be so afraid that, like, people are going to judge you and be scared of you and think you have some crazy disease or think that you are, like, some crazy weird freak. Like, that's not true. No. Like, people are actually more attracted to you and you're your authentic self.
Absolutely. That is such a great truth to share, because it sounds counterintuitive. Like, you go in and you're so scared.
And you have to, like, say certain things and be a certain person and not say certain things because it will turn people off. But
on the other side of it, you go, oh my God, wait a minute. It's like the opposite of what I thought. Like, I have all these awesome people around me now that I wouldn't have had any other way.
And it's not easy to do that. No. Like, that's a really hard thing to do. I'm not saying, I think my point actually is the more you do it, like, the more comfortable you get. So, like, you know, you have to practice doing it. And then once you'll get to a point where you're just like, okay, this is who I am. And you don't even think twice about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I love it. Oh, I'm so inspired. I'm so inspired by you.
I'm inspired by you.
Oh my goodness. So, we could do another. I'm saying this like, I feel like we're talking. I know we could just epic podcast this one off into like many other topics. I'm trying to think of some of the things that we didn't talk about. So now, what are some of the tools you spoke already about? Some of them, but that you use to kind of continue on this path. Are there tools in particular that you use to stay grounded or to stay positive or to, like, deal with when you're like, oh my God, I don't know what I'm doing? I mean, is there anything that you could share with people listening that might be useful to them?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I feel like I wish I, like, had a better answer because, like,
there's no right answer.
I know. I think that this is so typical, but I'm really trying to start like a real meditation practice because I know how important it is. And I think that's another thing. It's like once you actually can get into the routine of it, it becomes second nature, but I haven't gotten there yet. And I'm just very determined to, because I think that it helps with like tuning out all the negativity. What else? And as we talked about before, just like surrounding yourself with people that believe in you.
That's a huge
one.
It's
like the most important thing.
Right.
And I think that that's what will like allow anyone to continue to be themselves. It's just like be with the people that support you. And it's not, if someone doesn't support you or believe in you, you don't have to say like, F you, get out of my life. But it's just like spend less time with that person.
Right.
You know?
Right. Yeah.
I don't know. And what other tools? Oh, another thing I'm trying to do is I'm trying to become a better reader. And I have like a library of books, because whenever I hear of like a book that sounds interesting, I order it on Amazon and I just put it on a bookshelf, but I don't read them.
Right. I have a lot of books I need to read.
So I'm like really determined, reading every night for a half hour. And I'm reading one really interesting book now called The Body Keeps the Score. And it's super interesting. So if anyone's interested in, like, it's about trauma and chronic pain and PTSD and how the body responds to all of these things, and the body keeps the score of what's going on in your life. Like, it shows up in your body. And a famous psychiatrist or psychologist wrote it. And it's really interesting. So I'm determined to get through this book. And I just want to, like, this year, I just want to learn more and, like, become a better reader and just, like, learn.
I love it.
Yeah.
I hear what you're doing, right? You're going with the flow.
Yeah.
I think that's I think that it'll just guide you to the next right thing with the right attitude.
Thank you.
Yeah. And doing the next right thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? And trusting.
Trusting the process.
We talked about that, trusting the process.
Yeah.
Believing.
One other thing that sometimes I find myself like because I'm sure that you've experienced this, but when you kind of start something, or I don't know, a lot of people like to give their opinion and to give their advice and tell you how to do things.
Yes.
And it's really easy to just like listen and get caught up and think that everyone's right and that everyone knows better than you.
Yes.
And sometimes it's helpful, and sometimes I like feel it inside. I'm like, oh my God, this is giving me so much anxiety, like I can't stop, but I don't know what to say. And I think that just like really always being able to tell myself, like, just breathe. It's just their opinion. Like,
absolutely.
They're not right.
Yes.
I mean, maybe they're right. I don't know. But like, don't get so involved in
other people's
caught up
opinion.
in their opinion and what people say and how someone tells you to do something.
Yeah.
It's like, everyone has an opinion, and just like staying true to yourself and like constantly reminding yourself, like, okay, but I've gotten this far, so like I'm doing something right, and like just keep being me, you know.
How did you get this wise, man? When I was 24, I don't know what I was doing, but like I don't know that I had all this knowledge. It's really incredible. No, it's absolutely what you just said is so incredibly true.
Because that's hard to do.
I struggle with it
too. You get into a conversation with someone, and then you're like, oh my God, like they're right. Should I do that? Should I change this? Should I?
Right. Should I do this? Should I be doing that?
Yeah.
But you know, the truth is all these rules that were set up about about the way you're supposed to do a podcast, or the way you're supposed to write a song, or the way you're supposed to. Who made these rules? And rules are made to be broken. All the people who did something interesting,
and you're doing it your way.
They broke the rules, you know. And I mean, you know, I always think about Freddie Mercury and Bohemian Rhapsody. You know, like I remember seeing that. Like everyone was like, "It's junk." You know, nobody's gonna listen to a song that's that long. And he was like, "They will." You know, and he just did it, right?
Yeah.
And said, "You know what? I don't care about the haters. You know." But you don't have to be upset and reactive. And I think that's really good, because that just drains your energy.
It just drains, exactly.
And you want to keep that energy and vibration up to do the things that are important.
Totally.
That's very good advice. Oh, my goodness. Well,
what else?
Is there anything else that you want to share with us?
Yeah, I
about
think
your experience?
Two things. She's just like a psychiatrist. No, sorry. She's not a psychiatrist. She's a psychologist, and she specializes in healing chronic pain. So she has all of these programs called the Cure for Chronic Pain. And she studied under Dr. John Sarno, so it's all mind-body medicine and how repressed emotions cause physical symptoms. That's her whole entire thing, and she's healing people all throughout the world who have been in chronic, debilitating, suicidal pain for 20 years. They do her, it's called journal speak. They do her work, and they have these miraculous recoveries, and it's real. It's super real. And that doesn't work for everyone, but it works for a lot of people.
Yeah.
So anyways, I reached out to her because a girl messaged me on my podcast and was like, I listened to your podcast. Thank you. I want to tell you about this woman, Nicole Sachs, who her work saved my life. And I just think you should know about her. So I looked into her and I was like, okay, this is crazy. This is so cool. She has a podcast called The Cure for Chronic Pain. And now she's not seeing clients, but she's really just public speaking. And so I messaged her on Instagram. I was like, I have this podcast. Would you come on it? And she said, yes. I'm like, I'm in New York next week. Like, great. So we set it up.
Amazing.
It was amazing. And one of the things that, like, I vividly remember her saying was, life is a choice of what hurts and what hurts worse. And it's like, everything you do is a choice. So, like, in my head, I see people who we could take, chronic UTIs, for example, bladder pain or vaginal pain. You have if you know that eating a specific food, let's say, is going to make your pain worse, like, you have a choice.
Right.
Yeah, that food tastes really good, but it might cause pain. Which one do you want?
Right.
And that's not easy. Like, yeah, it'd be great if, a lot of people with bladder pain, coffee irritates their bladder.
Right.
But it's not forever. So it's like, do you want to make the choice for the next 6 months to cut out caffeine?
Right.
And let your bladder heal? Or do you want to drink the coffee and never let your bladder heal? I mean, it's all a choice.
It's all a choice.
So she says what hurts and what hurts worse. Everything you do is a choice. Healing is a choice. Making a career change is a choice. Like, does it feel better to be in a job that you hate,
right,
or to be scared to take a different job? Like, they both hurt in different ways.
Yeah, and when you, I don't know,
which one hurts worse?
Like, I'm like, wouldn't you rather just hurt and be doing your own thing? Like, if you're gonna hurt,
or like a breakup. Does it hurt to be in a bad relationship, or does it hurt more to be single but not have, like, an abusive boyfriend? I don't know. They both gonna hurt.
Yeah. but both are a decision, right? Doing nothing is a decision.
It's a decision.
Doing something is a decision. And the choice is yours.
The choice is yours. And a lot of, like, the biggest choices that we make are, like, they're both hard. They both might hurt a little bit, but one will serve us more probably. And so, like, how can you muster up the power inside yourself to make the choice that might still hurt but will serve you more?
So, I mean, it really is what I'm hearing you speak to, is the fact that it seems like sitting still in a job that you don't like is safe, or not painful, right? I think that's like a myth. It's not, but it's like a slow kill.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like, when they put the lobster in, if you put a lobster in, like, cold water and then you keep heating it up or whatever, and then they slowly fall asleep. Like, it's horrible. That's horrible. but exactly, it's totally a myth that it's, everything's going to go great and it's going to be safe and everything, because everything in life, is based on the choice. And if you choose to stay in that, you may be unhappy. You may regret. You may not meet people you could have met that might have changed things. You may have not experienced certain things, and it might be okay. But maybe there's more. So for anyone out there, take the leap. Yeah. Like Hannah did.
And you.
Because it's super powerful. Yeah. And you change the world for people. I mean,
trying.
Yeah. But when people who choose to be in their purpose, no matter what that is, authentically, like you were talking about, it's not just you change the room you walk into, but you change people's lives, because I think everyone is secretly, desperately wanting to be themselves.
Of course.
And when you do it, you give someone else the courage to do it. They go, oh, I can do that too. Yeah. Like, I'm sure, like you were talking about, like certain people looking and saying, you're going to do what? You're going to move back to your parents. You're doing this podcast. Da, da, da. But, you know, those same people, it stirred something in them. And they may come back to you in a year or two, or not, but they may, being like, how did you do it?
Totally.
How did
I have
you
my
do
best
it?
friend now. I want to start a podcast. Can you help?
How did you do
like,
it?
of course, you're my best friend. I'm happy to help you, but it's just
People
that's
have
what
different
happens.
timing,
Yeah,
you know, different
exactly.
paths. Yeah, amazing.
I can talk about the rebrand really quick so people
Oh,
know.
of course. I was going to ask you about, you know, what's going on now
Yeah.
and how people can find you, and totally wanted to ask you about the rebrand.
Just to give people a little context as to why I'm talking
Yeah.
about vaginas and bladder. And
Absolutely.
sex and-
Yes.
I said a few times, like, I had this podcast that was focused on pelvic health. But then, as we were talking about before we started recording, is I realized that this content, you know, is applicable to so many women. And I noticed that the majority of the people listening to my podcast were women with diagnosed pelvic pain or practitioners in this space. And I was like, I want more women to feel included into this community.
Right.
Not just because there's so many women that could have some, you know, something in here in this content could be helpful for them, but they might not, you know, resonate with pelvic health.
Yeah. Right.
And I was telling friends about what I was doing, and I really just wanted all women to like feel like they could go to this platform to listen and learn about their bodies. And now, like, my new slogan is, you thought about it, we talk about it, because it's like all the things that women always thought about, but we're too afraid to talk about.
It's a great slogan. Sorry,
Really?
I love it. Say
Thank
it
you.
again. What's the slogan?
You thought about it, we talk about it.
Yeah, we need to talk about it.
We need to talk about it. So I decided I wanted to change, you know, rebrand and change the name and just make it more about women's intimate health in general, and like still have the same premise that it's educational and informative and practical and implementable and serious, like not about, you know, just sex and vibrators and whatever. Like, it's serious content, but a place where women could really like learn. And so I changed the name to the V Hive, and now it's just kind of all things women's intimate health, and it's available on iTunes, SoundCloud, Spotify, wherever.
Right, so people can find you.
They can find wherever they listen.
You have the V Hive. I know you have V Hive on Instagram.
Yeah, it's Instagram. It's the V Hive _ at the end. I'm trying to get the V Hive plain, like, in itself, but that's a process. Someone else has it, so I need to figure out how to snatch that.
You'll get it.
If anyone has any suggestions, let us know. And then Facebook, it's the V Hive Media. Twitter, it's the V Hive. And then you can go to the website, thevhive.com. You can email us, info@thevhive.com.
Info
at thevhive.com.
Okay.
For anyone who wants to email. And then I recently created, I'll stop there. I'll let you continue.
No, you can keep going. What are some of the new things that you are
I'm
up
like
to?
jumping 10 steps
Oh,
ahead.
I know, but I want to hear them.
I know, because I'm so eager to share about this.
What are some of the new things you're up to now? Like new projects, new ideas?
Yeah, two things. I'm always like jumping ahead.
I love that. It's all perfect. We're exactly where we're supposed to be, doing exactly what we're supposed to be doing.
I have to tell myself that too.
Yes,
Thank you.
but it's the truth.
I know. Thank you for always reminding me. So, for those of you who aren't familiar with what Patreon is, it's just like a tiered membership platform where you can it's a platform for creators to provide their audience with additional benefits and content and exclusive content, essentially. So I just created this Patreon where you can sign up for different monthly levels and you get additional exclusive content with like bonus episodes and ebooks and events and stuff like that. So you can go to patreon.com/thevhive and look at that. And then another thing that I'm working on is a month, like a 30-day women's intimate health like meal plan reset book, because I realized that so many women who have, I saw it in myself, and I just so deeply believe that what we eat like makes a huge difference in the way that we feel.
Right.
And I think that without like having someone to like, it's hard for women to make the change if they don't have someone to keep them accountable. So I kind of realized, like, a lot of women like to see I eat super healthy, and a lot of people, I don't really post about it, but a lot of people would, like, even my friends would be like, you should share more about what you eat, because people are, like, interested in how to eat healthier, especially women with chronic pain. It's so important. Even this, like, you know, to me, what I think is so common knowledge is really, like, this is not, like, a lot of women don't know this. So, like, cutting out sugar, for example, could be so helpful for so many people. It can help lower inflammation and stress and, you know, whatever, like, the list, I can't even, like, everything. But anyway, so I decided I wanted to create this meal plan where I can kind of just, women can, like, a cheap and easy thing that women can buy, and they can kind of have, like, a 30-day reset and learn how to just, like, get healthy for themselves.
I love it, because it's tying into your IIN.
Exactly.
It's tying back to, like, your skill set. It's amazing. I love it.
Yeah. So, and it's something I'm passionate about, and I've spent so much time and energy and money going to all these doctors, and I had so many gut issues. So learning how to heal my gut and how to eat the right way. And now I'm like, I have all this knowledge and I live this way. So why not create something where I can just share this with people? And, you know, not everyone has, like, I feel fortunate I had access to figure out how to fix what was wrong with me, and like, how can I give this knowledge to other women? That's what I want to do. So
amazing.
Yeah.
So if you didn't catch every one of the ways that in which you can check out what Hannah's doing and also support what she's doing, I'll make sure to include it in the notes with this podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing with us. I'm so excited to see what you're going to do next.
I'm so excited you started this. It's
Thank
amazing.
you. Yeah.
Thanks for having me on.
I'm so glad that you agreed to come on and share your amazing story.
I'm so happy too. Thank you.
All right.
Okay.